Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everybody. It's a Friday, and I'm on air, and I couldn't be more excited. And why? Because I miss my show very much. Second of all, my guest couldn't possibly be more incredible. That's reason 2. Reason 3, it's actually 30-something, but it looks like it's 50-something in Wisconsin, so that's kind of lovely. Number 4, I got word on the street. Those of you that are listening in right now that are Chicago, Illinois residents or somewhere close to Illinois, turns out I just got the word today. There's a drive-in theater that is opening tomorrow night in Illinois. I'm going to be putting this on my social media, and I'm so excited about this because if you listen to me on a regular basis, you already know that I live and breathe the drive-in well before this whole crisis occurred. So I couldn't possibly be more thrilled. Big shout out to the gentleman at Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake. Due to his generosity, he literally sponsored the entire event for tomorrow night. So how cool is that? You get to be able to go see the drive-in movies. I realize, of course, that they are juvenile. Now, remember, it's Flintstones and Jurassic World. So, or Jurassic Park, rather. So don't get excited about seeing like a real movie. But the coolest part about it is it's sponsored by a particular allows individuals, even though there's no concession stand, and obviously there's lots of careful. So since it's free, they won't be taking tickets, and of course, obviously they're distancing cars. But the cool part is you get to go back to somewhat of a normal semblance of life. So shout out to you folks in Illinois. Like I said, I'll be putting the information on the drive-in. He's limiting it, I think, to about 300 cars. So yeah, watch for that on my social media. So hey, everybody, happy Friday. Like I said, a couple quick announcements before I get to talking to Andy. First off, want to remind everybody, even though Bedford Falls Film Festival, which is my festival, of course, with my partner, Michael, Art is Alive is still going on, and yes, Art is Alive is going live, not virtual. I refuse to go virtual. I think I've said that publicly quite a bit. So if you go to artisalivefilmfestival.weebly.com, you will see that I am still accepting screenplays up to 120 words. I'm also accepting used films from 5 minutes up to 90 minutes. Same thing with regular films of all genres, which is up to 90 minutes. If you go to Film Freeway and type in Art is Alive Film Festival, you will also note that I've extended out the submission acceptance deadline to the beginning of June. I've also dropped the prices. Used films remain at $10. Screenplays and films have all go down to $15 for submissions. That will help you. Audiences here. First off, sadly, by the time the end of August rolls around, we'll be tired of being inside. Second of all, I've got some tremendous films from all sorts of places. This year, again, a lot of international acceptances, so thanks so much. Want to remind everybody, I just last week forgot to announce that, yes, the April issue went out at the tail end of April for my magazine, the Art is Alive magazine, to those of you that never heard. So very blessed, and a big shout-out to the Old Tool family from the show on MTV, Families of the Mafia. Not only was I able to do a review of the show in writing, but I myself was able to interview the entire family and do a tribute on the front cover and the inside of the magazine to Billy O'Toole, who, as all of you found out last night, passed away in July in Staten Island. So, of course, my love and my prayers and my great debt of gratitude to the family for letting me cover Billy. So thanks so much. Again, www.theartisalivemagazine.com. It's live now, $5 for the monthly subscription, $40 for the year. And if you want a hard copy, just go ahead and send an email. It's $10 on that. Stay tuned for word on some drive-in theaters we've been able to solidify to allow us to do some indie movie nights. So stay tuned for that. My Michael, of course, is going to be taking a show on the road with me. I get to perform with him, talk about Scared Shitless. So stay tuned for that as far as that goes. And, of course, obviously, a reminder to everybody who's listening in, yes, I'm currently accepting content for my radio show. I'm full for May now, but, of course, June. Just like with the magazine, we're halfway through for content for June. So anything for July and August, always open to your ideas, of course. And before I forget to say it, of course, here we are at the beginning of Mother's Day weekend. So to those of you that are listening in, happy early Mother's Day. I think I've rambled enough. So without further ado, let's get Andy on the line and start speaking with her. Andy?
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Well, you can see I was rambling on and on and on there. The hard part is when you're not on radio for a while, you're like, oh, I forgot this, and oh, I should mention this, and oh, I should talk about that, and the kids are home, and you know what I mean? There's a lot going on. And I'm nervous because I'm talking to you. I don't always get nervous, but I'm petrified of you in a good way.
Oh, gosh.
So No, have you read about yourself? Like, I've Googled you, I've Facebook you, I've Instagrammed you. You're a big deal. Anytime big
Oh,
deals
my
come
goodness.
to my show, I get scared. But I'm scared
Well,
in a good way, so I'm,
What might make you feel better is if you did you know that I am a Wisconsinite myself? I'm from the Milwaukee area.
I did.
So
I thought that was
you know
so cool.
I can't be too intimidating if I'm
no.
Wisconsin nice.
Yes, but now, see, you're in New York City, so you're the perfect person. This is like the perfect start-off question because I thought about asking you this before. I'm a Wisconsinite now. I go back and forth working between here and New York, and I've decided to move to New York when my kids are grown in like 3.5 years. So I'm curious to ask your experience now that you've been there a while. Do you miss Wisconsin? I mean, was it a good move? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, it was definitely the right move. I've been here 12 years or so. Is that right? Yeah. So I've been out here a long time. And I first moved out here because my industry was here. I started out as a magazine editor and worked at Glamour and Self and some other magazines. And so this is where they're based. But at this point, I've been, self-employed, writing full-time for 5+ years. And even so, I love being in New York and could do it from anywhere, but wouldn't really want to do it from anywhere else. The one wrinkle is that the last 2 months, New York has been, like most of America, sort of closed down. So right now, there's all the annoying things like high rent, small apartments, but none of the nice things like the amazing, arts and culture scene and my friends and editors being nearby. So this is a wrinkle where I'm not exactly thrilled to be in New York, but in general, I absolutely love it here, and I just love it. The energy, the people, the creativity.
Exactly, and they're so, and this is not a diss on Wisconsin. I've tried a film festival here. I've tried all sorts of different avenues. There's tons of friends of mine that are musicians and in the arts, and they really want to do well. They're excited to bring their craft out there, but it seems like New Yorkers really embrace theater, art, the written word. That's why it's so crippling right now. They're going on. I saw that Shetler Studios just closed recently, which is heartbreaking for so many of my friends. It tears me apart that so many of the arts and creatives are affected by that, everything that's going on and such. And you guys have similar weather. I was hoping, like, when I moved to New York that it would be better. No, it's not. I also thought that when I left Wisconsin that there'd be some differences. Like, the subway still scares me. I won't lie. I'm afraid of people on the like normally when it's not right now. Like, people scare me because they stare at me on the subway, which creeps me out. You have rats. I didn't know you had rats until like 3 months ago. I kid you not.
Oh, yeah.
There's
definitely rats. Yeah.
And it's gross. I'm like, oh, my gosh. Ew.
Yeah, but we don't have, like, foxes or hodags or any of some of the things that, Wisconsin deals with. So
Absolutely. You are absolutely correct. So we're both very blessed at this particular point in time. You're clearly based in Brooklyn, so, of course, not Manhattan and some of the other surrounding areas. So, of course, I want to ask you in terms of how you're dealing with this mentally. A lot of times everybody's talking about the physical impact, and I'm really huge on, are you okay? How are you faring with this? I mean, as a writer, of course, we have our own tricks of the trade to deal with things, but how are you mentally there, especially there, because New York is a hot spot, as we know. How are you dealing with all of this mentally, without the routine, without, everything open? How is it affecting you?
Yeah, it's really tough. And thanks for asking that, because it can be tough to remember that people do want to share and connect over the mental element and emotional element of it. For me, I live alone. I live in a studio apartment, and I work from home, as I said, for 5+ years. And yet I'm an extrovert, and so normally it was this nice balance of I would work from home and then I would go see friends. And obviously I haven't been able to do that for a few months now, and that was very frustrating. Not to mention my book, which I'm sure we'll talk about, came out March 24th, so right in the thick of all of this, which was just incredibly frustrating and sad and a bummer and disappointing. And so I've just really been trying to focus on sort of self-compassion and being kind to myself and not judging myself for feeling angry or disappointed or infuriated or anxious or any of those things, and instead to just sort of let the feelings be and, accept them and sort of be kind to myself, because I think it can be very tempting to judge your own feelings and think that because other people have it worse, which certainly they do. Certainly having your book come out in a pandemic is not the worst of the trials and tribulations that some Americans are facing, but to still let those, it still does suck, and to sort of let myself acknowledge that, and by acknowledging it, then, sort of being able to process it and let it go. So yeah, I've had obviously a lot of time for introspection being here with just me and my cat. And I kind of now have a routine and feel like this feels normal again, which is a little frightening. But now I feel pretty much like myself. Yeah.
Well, and part of the reason I asked you this, which of course I did happen to find out, we'll talk about this in a second, but I know that obviously when you went to school, your minor was in psychology. So one of the things we do on my show is I'm very, very adamant about doing this. It's very important to me that people remember, so I'll remind everybody right now before I forget to say it, everyone that is listening to this today or will listen to this at another time is essential. One of my trigger things is when I'm reading about the definition these days between essential and non-essential. Everyone is essential. Every single person. Everyone listening to this, everyone who will listen to it later. So I wanted to point that out. But I know you have a minor in psychology, which means you're probably brighter than I am. So, but anyways, if someone is listening to this today, and obviously because you have some background and study in this, what would you recommend to them to keep up a good mental health balance? I think it's so important to wake up every day and have something or certain things. But you, for instance, would probably be a better person to ask that to. So what would you recommend would be best for people to try to keep a good mental health head frame, for lack of a better term? To
be in a good space. Yeah, I was an editor at Psychology Today for a few years as well, and have written other pieces on mental health. And so kind of the things that float up towards the top in terms of helping people get through tough times are, that self-compassion that I mentioned, that sort of kindness. And what I found really helpful is when I'm feeling upset, is sort of pausing and identifying it, noticing what it is that I'm feeling, where I'm feeling it, in my body, whether that's up in my chest or in my stomach or a headache. And then this is a step a lot of people miss, taking a moment to actually show yourself some kindness and compassion and love. So that could take the form of putting your hand over your heart, or just kind of silently saying to yourself something like, it's okay, or I'm here for you, or acknowledging this is really hard, and just sort of showing yourself the kindness that you would show a friend or a loved one going through something tough can really help you process that emotion and not have it drag you down. And I think another element that's really important and helpful right now is mindfulness. And so for some people that takes the form of meditation. And if you're good at meditation or willing to do it, good for you. I've just never been one to get into a routine so far. But what's also quite helpful, and the research bears this out, is just small moments, quick moments of becoming mindful and coming into the present moment. And so something that I've tried to do that I've shared with friends is when I'm washing my hands, which I do for a full 20 seconds, I count it down from 20. And during those 20 seconds, I try to just become mindful and just sort of quiet the narration running through my head and all the thoughts and whatever's going on. And for 20 seconds, I just count down mentally 20 to 1 and wash my hands. And I just sort of focus on the sensations. And, washing your hands feels nice. The water is warm. The soap is sudsy. You're kind of giving yourself a little hand massage as you work all the way to your wrists and thumb and everywhere else. And so it's just kind of a reminder many times a day to, breathe, get out of your head, step into the moment, which can be really helpful with whatever sort of stress or anger or sadness or whatever has sort of hijacked your mind. So I think those are the two big things I would recommend.
God, listen to this. You're the first guest that actually made it sound appealing to wash your hands. Holy cow, folks, did you hear that? Because I'm all like, oh, great, my hands are chapped now and I look like garbage, and isn't this wonderful? And, oh, yeah, I gained like 20 pounds sitting at home doing nothing, half the time. So I like the fact
Right.
that there's a positive element to that. That's awesome. Because oftentimes, as you know, it's a lot of the negative. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And since we're on your education, we should talk about this. Again, did I indicate how intimidated? Why? She went to Northwestern University with a minor in psychology and a major in journalism and graduated magna cum laude, which I didn't. Thanks. So this is what I want to ask you, of course. We're in an ever-changing world. You know this. Obviously, of course, case in point. When I published my first book, things were so different than they are now. When I first started writing, things were so different. Obviously, because we're in a new world now, and a lot of times people listening to my show are first getting into the field, first graduating, etc. So if someone's listening right now and they get into journalism and in particular trying to pick a school that will benefit them, tell us a bit about what your education provided to you in terms of being a published author down the road.
Sure. So for me, I studied journalism, and it was through my program at Northwestern. I had to choose a track of, at the time it was TV, newspaper, or magazine. I think now they have sort of new media as one of the options, but I chose magazines, and through the university got set up with an internship, and I believe the program doesn't work the same way now. So again, I'm talking about doing this 15 plus years ago.
Sure.
But through that, I had my first experience with magazines and just sort of fell in love with them. I knew I liked to write, but it wasn't until I actually studied them or actually interned at one that I realized it was totally what I wanted to do. But very much to your point of things looking differently now, I mean, I signed on for a job that doesn't totally exist anymore. I jumped into magazines and I worked in them for years. And moved up the ladder and moved up the masthead, but the magazine landscape kind of crumbled beneath me, and the job that I dreamed of being sort of a glamorous editor-in-chief, I'm not sure it exists anymore. And so for me, I was pivoting toward fiction writing just as something that was for me and that couldn't be taken away from me, the way that these magazines I worked at kept folding and kind of the ground collapsing underneath me. And so I hadn't taken creative writing classes. I hadn't really used my undergrad experience to inform the writing. I didn't do an MFA or any programs like that. But I did read a lot, which I think is one of the most important things. In terms of like selecting a university and selecting a program and a degree and all that, I think it does matter. It can matter, but I think it ultimately matters less than one might think. I certainly have met a lot of authors who've had a lot of success who came from a background in law or a background in physics. I have a friend who's a physicist and started writing fiction. I think if you have a passion for writing and are willing to do a lot of reading, then the fiction piece can come. And in terms of if you want to be a journalist, Northwestern, at least when I was there, had a fantastic program, and I, through it, met a lot of my classmates who now are sort of peers in the business, but you don't need a journalism degree to get into journalism. I think the most important thing is getting experience. It's very much a trade more so than a field of study. And so it is one way to network and get prepared for a job in the business, but I've also seen great journalists who studied all sorts of different things, who sort of learned journalism by working in journalism, and I think that's a totally valid option as well.
Amen to that one. I say that all the time. In fact, somebody had just given me flack about this because I started my magazine, less than a year ago, and of course all of this has happened. And half of my staff writers right now are those that have only been published a few times or have lacked experience. And granted, they're shadowed by me and others, but I know that oftentimes people always expect, you have to hire the elite in your field to get a good product to go out there. And I've always said the same as you. Mm-hmm. How will you ever learn unless you get experience? How will you know unless people give you a chance? And moreover, nowadays we live in a world, and you're in media yourself. So I guess my question to you is, a lot of people are questioning us as members of the media, not necessarily us per se, but questioning the validity of fact versus fiction in media. So another great question to ask you, where do you stand on all of that? Is it easier for you to try to compartmentalize what you believe, who you follow, et cetera, et cetera? Or what advice would you give to people because they're scrambling and looking for facts and figures here?
It is tough right now, and I did not expect to see in my lifetime this level of animosity towards the press,
right.
who,
right.
you know, I've always been a part of it, and so it's always been very obvious to me that, you know, with a few fringe exceptions, these people are just trying to share the truth with you. They don't have some crazy ulterior motive or other agenda. And, you know, certainly to have a president in a White House right now that's sort of demonizing the press is unprecedented and rather scary from what I can tell. So I think, you know, media literacy is something I wish that we started learning in grade school. I wish it were something that we, you know, all were forced to become familiar with so that we could parse the facts ourselves. But I think what can really help is, you know, trying to gather information from not a single news source. For a lot of people, just going to BBC, like I know my mom gets her news from BBC because it's not American, so it's not as invested as, you know, as some other ones are going to be, even when they're covering American politics. It might be a little more clear-headed. And, you know, just taking a look at how the same article is reported, the same story is reported through different outlets and sort of, you know, noticing differences and noticing what is spin versus what is true. And then just also taking the extra step. I know we're all busy, but taking the extra step to check for sources on things. Like, you know, there's a video going around right now that has gone quite viral about coronavirus that is just completely, Snopes has just totally, you know, ripped it apart. The main source behind it is not legitimate. Or I see it with, you know, someone sharing an article or retweeting an article without even clicking through to it. There's just some headline that seems sensational. And I think it's really important to at least click through and check that things are coming from legitimate news sources that you've heard of, and that, you know, if you're not sure about a particular story, you can go to something like Snopes or factcheck.org and just research, like, is this true? Because, you know, I know that's extra work, and I know it can be really tempting to just check out and feel like there's no way to know what's true, but that's sort of exactly what the disinformation machine is hoping, that we'll all just give up on seeking the truth and wipe our hands clean of it. And once that happens, anyone can tell us anything. And that's not a functioning democracy, obviously.
Right. Absolutely. Interesting question here, because one of the things that's huge on my list talking to authors and editors and such is process. All of us have different processes for doing the craft that we do, and we also have the same process when it comes to not being able to do our craft. About one is to create powerful writing, and then on the other side of the fence, tell me what prevents you from what I throw pencils. When I can't write, I throw multitudes of pencils from one side of the room to the other because I get so flustered. So tell us a bit about both sides of those coins for you, and hopefully that might help other people with their own writing.
Sure. So, you know, I've been doing fiction for about 5 years at this point, and just to mention the kind of thrillers I do, my first novel, which came out last year in 2019, was called The Lost Night. It was a thriller sort of set in the warehouse parties of hipster Brooklyn. And then my newer book that just came out this March is called The Herd, and it's a thriller that's set in an exclusive, elite, all-female co-working space. And for both of those, I think to writing, I write without an outline, so I'm one of those rare, say, pantsers instead of plotters, which is just how I do it, and it doesn't mean that it's better or worse than starting with an entire outline and working from there. But for me, the way that the story really comes together is just by having daily word count goals and committing to working on the book every day, with, you know, exceptions here or there if I'm on vacation or just know I need to give my brain a one-day break or something like that. But I think, you know, when you talk about throwing pencils against the wall, like, of course I feel that too. And for me, what works is, again, just committing to continue writing. And for me, that takes the form of using the Pomodoro Method. So I will set a timer for 20 minutes, and for those 20 minutes, I will write. Even if that means that the first few sentences out of my fingers are, I hate this scene is terrible, this book is terrible, I don't know what to write, I don't know what I'm doing. And I just keep moving my fingers. And once you get that out, after probably 30 seconds, you will start writing again. Something happens. Your brain gives up with arguing with you. And so I work for 20 minutes, and then when the timer goes off, I take a 5-minute break. And that, science has shown that is sort of the right amount of time for your brain to not get distracted, and 5 minutes is the right break for you to sort of refresh yourself so you don't get burned out. And then when the 5-minute timer goes off, then I start another, quote, Pomodoro. I start for 20 more minutes. And I just kind of repeat until I've hit my word count goal for the day and can push my laptop away and call it a day. But I really recommend for people who don't have deadlines like I do and are just kind of working on it for themselves at this point, I think even committing to 20 minutes a day, just one Pomodoro method, can be really, really, successful and productive and helpful in helping you get enough words on the page that it begins to feel real and it begins to feel like you really have a project in front of you that you're invested in and that you want to finish because you've gone so far.
Well, you betcha. Well, and what's interesting is listening to you talk about it, and most people may not realize that for some there is a psychology or method by which to do writing, that it is, I'm always on the creative side. So for me, I'm always looking for the pretty, really creative sort of thing as far as that goes. And that's when I think I get frustrated. If I lack a bit of passion at times, harder for me to write. But it's interesting to hear someone who does it more methodically. It's very interesting. Not a lot of writers come on here and talk about that. And it's awesome to see that you get success from that, obviously. Side of the fence, doing editing is not the same as doing writing, because I know that I enjoy writing far better than editing. It can be kind of grueling somewhat. Again, on that side of the fence, do you have a particular process, because you've been editing for some time now, and tell me one thing that you look for in any piece where you say, bam, hit the nose right on the head?
Hitting the nose on the head in terms, go ahead. Sorry,
No.
You cut out for a moment, so I think I missed the very end of that. Oh, shoot.
Where I'm tingling, you know what I mean, and I just know I'm doing well. For you, when you're editing a piece, how do you know when someone's caught it head on? Is it the way that they do it in terms of verbiage? Is it how they set their story? What works for you in terms of editing for a good story?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something I haven't really thought about. But I think I know that the story is really working when there's either a detail or a sentence that captures the entire story in just one little detail. So to give an example, if someone is writing a profile and they're telling us about this celebrity that they spent a few hours with or something, if they can give us just one amazing detail about a little interaction or just the smallest thing that this celebrity did that just perfectly encapsulates, like, oh, now I get this person, then I know that we've nailed it. I'm looking for that, like, just sweet little moment of clarity. And I think in a similar way, even if this was, let's say, an investigation and I was editing, an investigative feature article, if they can give us that one sentence, I guess we would call it a nut graph usually in journalism, but if they can tell me in one sentence, like, what makes this story so critical and why it needs to be told, and it sort of distills it in a nutshell, then I know everything is going to, like, we've got it. There might be some editing that needs to come before and after, but, like, we've hit the nail on the head, and so everything else will sort of fall into place around that. And so I encourage people to think about that. I've helped author friends write, for example, essays and op-eds that sort of relate to their novels, just as a way to sort of promote them. And a lot of people aren't familiar with the idea of a nut graph. And so they're, for example, in an essay telling the story chronologically, but they never think that they never think to include somewhere towards the top the reason you're telling me this story. Like, what is the point you're trying to make with this story that should encourage readers to sort of follow along? We don't know who you are otherwise. And I think just thinking about it in those terms, what's the elevator pitch for this feature? What's the one sentence sort of summary of why this matters? If you can figure that out, then it will make your writing certainly easier. And if you as an editor can look for that, it'll make it easier to organize as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I see clearly, for those of you that do not know this, in the past, your work, your particular written work, as it relates to contributions, is done in places like Vogue, Cosmopolitan, USA Today, Wall Street Journal. I have to ask this question because some writers never get the opportunity to write for what we call, of course, top-tier publications such as these. So is the expectation higher from the publication itself or from the sole person, meaning in this case you, to perform at an accelerated level? Because oftentimes I imagine just the names alone are intimidating, let alone contributing to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So in my case, I think part of the reason I've had success with, top-tier publications is that I started out as an editor at several top-tier publications,
right.
Which was also, of course, a difficult thing to break into, and there was a lot of, rejections as well. But a lot of these assignments came from sort of personal connections. For example, someone I worked with at Self would go over to Women's Health magazine and then give me an assignment there, and someone would go to Martha Stewart Living. And, as people move around within an industry, you start to have connections at these different places. But I do think, having been an editor at these places too, it's sort of shocking and disappointing to me how some writers will turn in really low quality stuff and just expects a check for it. And you're paid more to write for top tier publications generally.
Sure.
And so you should, in my opinion, turn in your very best work. And especially if I'm working with a new editor that I haven't written for before, I double and triple check that manuscript before I turn it in the first time, so that their first impression of me is really this person knows how to write and how to make my life easy as an editor. I think expectations are high, and it's very important to sort of present yourself very professionally and to be really, have a high level of quality for especially that first assignment, because there are writers out there who, they have great clips, but that's because they had really good editors who took their, word vomit and turned it into something good, and their byline is still on it, so you wouldn't know. And so I think you have to sort of keep proving yourself and really just making yourself someone that editors love to work with if you want to keep getting work.
Oh, sure. The other thing I want to mention is, too, of course, at this current time, because things are a little shaky when it comes to we all know the publishing industry, are watching it unfold in front of us. So at this point, are there only a certain amount of publications you're contributing to in terms of your own written work? Because I know everyone's getting affected right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my major sort of side gigs was travel writing. I wrote travel pieces for Travel and Leisure and Photos and a bunch of different Condé Nast Traveler, a bunch of different outlets. And that has ground to a complete halt, understandably, because I'm not traveling anymore, so I don't have any pitches, and outlets are sort of scrambling to figure out what sort of travel content to put out. And they're feeling the squeeze as well. Jet Setter, for example, Jet Setter recently shut down. And so, I'm feeling that squeeze. It's leaving me with fewer places that I'm willing to write for. And, in my case, I'm quite fortunate because fiction writing is my main gig, and freelancing was sort of a small piece of the pie. And so I'm sort of redoubling my efforts on and focusing on fiction right now. But it's definitely tough times. And, when a recent college grad comes to me and says they want to be a full-time freelance writer, I sort of remind them, like, there might, be open to corporate copywriting and corporate communications and maybe PR and other things that are slightly more stable right now, because freelancing has always been a tough gig, and I think has actually recently gotten worse.
Oh, gosh, yeah, absolutely. I give credit to any of you folks listening in who are still kind of vacation, because it really is a very frightening time for the free press, very, very sadly. So on the flip side, on the editing, of course, are you still doing the editing portion, or, again, you're kind of seeing a decline in doing these things for the moment?
Yeah, I'm not really editing right now, because that was something I pretty much exclusively did when I was a full-time editor at different publications. So, yeah, these days I'm writing books and I'm writing freelance articles, and then I'm occasionally doing, like, copy editing or just little side gigs to piece together a living, like most creatives.
Right.
But, yeah, editing isn't something I've been in a major capacity for quite some time now.
Gotcha. Now, I couldn't tell in my research, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say your specialty is books, but you've not done a screenplay yet. Or have you actually done a screenplay, let's say, for the film or the stage? Just curious.
No, I haven't sold a screenplay. I haven't in any serious capacity pursued it, although it's definitely something interesting for someday.
You betcha. More on the creative side, I always ask people that. I'm like, why haven't you done anything that you could put on the screen as of yet? I'm always intrigued about that. But I'm not complaining. Your work is absolutely brilliant, so no worries there. Curious to ask this, optimistic for my fellow authors. I did see that you had to cancel the physical book tour that you were doing this year. So tell me, there's been a lot of conversations, and I'm just wondering in your case if this has happened, where they were actually talking about doing book events virtually, like your Zoom platforms and other platforms. Is that a consideration for you? Would you consider composing or putting together something like that? Would it be worth it for you in lieu of having to say the whole book tour thing will be off?
Yeah, so I definitely did pivot to some virtual things. The in-person tour has its own benefits, like being able to meet booksellers in person and being able to connect with readers face-to-face. But there are honestly some perks of doing things digitally as well. For example, my launch party was supposed to be at Books Are Magic, a bookstore here in Brooklyn, New York. And when it was canceled because they closed, Books Are Magic said, well, do you still want to do a launch party over Zoom that you can, invite your friends and family to? And it ended up being a lot of fun. And one of my good friends who lives in Australia was able to tune in, which obviously she would not have been able to attend the real life version of it. And so it has been nice in the sense that people from all over the globe literally can connect and talk about books. I've done a whole variety of, events at this point, partnering with like book influencers on Instagram to do things like Instagram Live. I've done some Facebook Lives and Facebook Ask Me Anythings in Facebook groups that are dedicated to reading and to books. And I've done, some Zoom sessions. For example, I was supposed to be in Minneapolis this weekend for the Wordplay Book Festival. And obviously it was, I shouldn't say canceled, because instead it went virtual. And so I did an event over Zoom with them, and they had a closing ceremony today, and they had apparently a really solid attendance and a lot of people who tuned into all the programming. I'm seeing an interesting thing where reading series and conferences and other things are pivoting to virtual. And I can't tell if it's moving the needle in terms of like sales for me, which is sort of the only metric that I care about, in the sense that it's, what sustains my career. I have to sell books to keep doing this. And so it's just really hard to say. I mean, it feels like people probably buy more books when they show up in person than when they see you on a screen and, have the option of going to a website after. But I still, I enjoy doing it, and I've virtually met some really interesting authors and other book people. And so, for me, it definitely has felt worth it. But I guess worth it would just depend on how anyone's definition for success would go.
Oh, you betcha. Yeah, I'm always curious to ask that because, of course, we all, as you said, we have to go outside of the box, think creatively, try to use new platforms, new ideas. And it makes me so sad when people have to actually attendance and say, hey, I can't be here in person. It definitely does make it a very big difference in change in an environment, of course. I want to take a look at the books themselves. So the first book, before we get into the herd, of course, was the Last Night. Now, I have to ask this question because you have been blessed with so many best books of 2019 from so many different platforms. Tell me, I think it's important that the authors themselves always recognizes this. Tell me why you believe that book deserves the best title, because that means then you own that greatness.
Wow. This is very un-Wisconsin of me to try to to wrap my, to try to be anything other than humble about it. I think The Lost Night is a well-constructed and well-written page-turner, and I think people are looking for that. And I think it's unique in sort of the psychological suspense space for a couple of reasons. It really puts a spotlight on complex female friendships, and it doesn't in any way revolve around sort of a primary romantic relationship, which I think, which I know a lot of sort of domestic suspense and thrillers by and for and about women do. They're about, she seems to have the perfect marriage, or she's a, widower, or she's the jealous ex-wife, or, it very often is about sort of family dynamics, which is great, but that's not the kind of book I write. I think there's lots of juicy stuff to dig into with friendships. And so I think that was a little bit unique. And then also, as I mentioned, it's the mystery of it is set in 2009 in hipster Brooklyn, and sort of the warehouse parties and concerts and, dive bars and all that. And I think it was sort of lucky in that it came out in 2019, 10 years after that particular moment in history and sort of the rise of the hipster. And so it was fun to try to capture that moment and sort of that like post-grad creative people running loose, treating the city like a playground in the middle of, the depths of the recession. And so I think sort of the setting and timing and social milieu, if you will, feels unique and hopefully is just fun to read about.
And what I found interesting, at least from most authors that I know, and I didn't get to read both of these books completely, so this is an estimate based on what I think I know, which is you, I'm guessing, embody at least one of your characters, not more, within your own books. Would that be true? Because I think that kind of emulates for a lot of us.
Yeah, I think people say, like, which of your characters are you? And I always say, well, I'm all of them. Like, I couldn't write a convincing character if they weren't some facet of me. I only have experience in one, human life, one human body, with one human brain. So yeah, I certainly was drawing heavily on my own experiences for both books, but also, I think there's a lot of universality, hopefully, about elements in both of these books about, in the case of The Lost Night, being 23 and just feeling like your friends are everything, and like it's sort of this, second adolescence where you're out on your own for the first time in a city, and the freedom of it, and sort of the fear of it too, and sort of how that can go. You can go too far with that freedom and make choices you regret.
Interesting. I have to ask this. You did your first book. Then, of course, obviously, we'll talk about the herd. Oftentimes, one of the things that I've always heard from most authors, and I want to get your take on this, is it true that it was much easier? In your case, you had a publisher for the second book. I'm guessing you had a publisher for the first. I couldn't verify that.
So the first, I wrote The Lost Night on my own, and then queried literary agents with it, and then sold it. So the first one I wrote not knowing if it would get published or not. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. I wanted to clarify that before I asked this question, because a ton of the interested viewers or interested listeners in this case that I have are always looking for new and interesting ways to publish. Now, as we all know, you can't always just get a literary agent or a publicist or someone to take you on. So if someone's listening today, they want to go the traditional publishing route, is there such a thing as I don't want to say easier way in, but a way to do their own paving of the work or the road to try to get there in an easier manner? Because it's tough. Publishing is really tough, even self-publishing.
Yeah.
But getting the attention of a publishing house, and even without an agent, how do they do so? Do you have any idea or any clues or tips?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is really hard. And I think it's going to be a while before we have the answers to the question of how is the current pandemic going to affect, publishing and what it takes to break into the industry as well. So in that sense, I'm kind of glad I was doing this a few years ago for the first time. But I went the traditional route, and I worked on the manuscript, and I had friends read it, and I just worked on it until I felt like it was as strong as it could be on its own. And I think, some people have ideas like, oh, I'll just write a sample of it and query with that. Or, oh, I won't do all the editing now because my agent will want to change it. No, you want it to be as perfect as it can be while also knowing it's going to go through additional editing. So I worked really hard on that. That was about 2 years of work. And then writing the query took a long time and took a lot of revisions too. Like that is your one shot at attracting the attention of potential literary agents. And so really getting the query letter perfect is important. And, ask everyone you can to read it, study go online and just study other people's query letters and elicit feedback, and whether you're using that to query a literary agent or, as you mentioned, some people will query directly to small publishers that they'll work with. That's sort of your pitch. That's a really, really important chance to show what you got. And another thing that I think can be helpful isn't necessary but can be helpful is having an online presence already, because something that agents and editors are looking for is just somebody who is going to embody their book and be willing to sort of be the public face of it. And so, you don't need a huge following on Twitter or whatever in order to have a book come out. Sure. But just, have professional headshots or put on a lot of makeup and have a friend use portrait mode on their phone to get some great photos. Follow other authors and interact with them. And this kind of surprised me, but apparently agents and editors do Google the author and look at them, and it's part of their calculation of, is this an author that we want to sign? And so, you don't need to be a huge influencer, but I think it's really smart to have Google search results that sort of demonstrate that you're committed to this, you're professional, you know how to comport yourself online, you're photogenic, you're if you've done podcasts or videos, like you're good on radio and on screen, like all those things can they won't make or break, but they really, if someone's on the fence, can help nudge you into the right direction.
Yes. Well, and the other thing, too, I find interesting is that oftentimes I've read query letters that are overextensive. Like oftentimes and maybe it's me, but I see almost too much information there, almost like a publicist, because oftentimes a publicist will send me 85 pages on something, and I'm like, I can't. You know what I mean? You just can't after a while. You're like, sometimes it's just a little too much, of course. The other thing about you that I find interesting is not every author I've ever interviewed has done both the ebook version as well as an audiobook version. Not all authors audio and have that available. For you personally,
So are you there? I'm sorry, I quickly cut out for a second,
leave?
But I can hear
you.
Could you
not hear? Oh, how frustrating.
So you were just,
sorry.
No, you were just asking about ebook and audio, right?
Right. I always find it curious because not every author, in fact, oftentimes authors that I interview only do the ebook and the hard copy. They don't think about doing audio. So I was just asking why the choice to do the audio version as well.
So in my case, I actually didn't have a choice. It was something that my publisher decided. And so the editor that bought The Lost Night as well as The Herd is part of an imprint of Penguin Random House. So then it became Penguin Random House's decision whether or not to produce audiobooks for both of them. And they did. And actually, I've been really grateful now because the audiobook sales as a portion of total sales has been higher for the Herd than they were for the Lost Night. And I think it's because bookstores are closed and it's not easy to necessarily order a hardcover and then wait a few weeks for it to show up at your door, and then you have to, wipe it down and hope it won't get you sick. And so I think audiobooks are just sort of an easier, immediate way to start listening to a book if you want to get your hands on it. So yeah, I've been grateful that it's been a way to consume it as well.
That's awesome. Definitely. And I've always said, who better to benefit from that than somebody who is, blind, obviously, or somebody who, clearly has disabilities and things like that. It's just an added bonus. So kudos to them on thinking of that. That's awesome. March 24th, release of The Herd, of course, which is the newest book that you've done. When you wrote the second, I guess we should backtrack a bit. The other question I had relative to The Lost Night is this. Differences between first book and second book. There's usually always at least one solid difference between book one and book two. Sounds like both of them run along the same lines in terms of being a thriller and having the same sort of resonating themes to them. But first book, second book, what did you notice the main difference for you was as the author?
Sure. Well, the experience of writing them was very different because, as I said, The Lost Night, I had all the time in the world and sort of was, pushing away at it, Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill on my own. Whereas when I sold The Herd, I had a deadline that was only a few months later for turning in the first draft. And so I had to be more disciplined, and I was writing it knowing it would come out versus working on it and having no idea if it would ever come to anything. But yeah, it was challenging actually to settle on an idea because my editor wanted it to sort of appeal to the same readers who had liked The Lost Night, but also to feel different and, have as good of a hook, but a different hook. And my editor actually rejected a few ideas for book two, which was quite frustrating at the time before we settled on The Herd. And now looking back, I'm very grateful she did because she sort of recognized what made a book an Andrea Bartz thriller before I did. And she sort of recognized what would keep me in my lane and appeal to the same people, but feel fresh and unique and different. So yeah, that the curse of nailing down that second book idea is very, very real, and it's a struggle. But I was happy this is where we landed.
Oh, you betcha, of course. And now, since it's only been out for a few different months, I guess it's really tough. Like you were, it's hard because now we've all been hit, so you don't know, if people can afford to buy books, afford to support things along those lines. On your own terms, would you consider the newest book being a success? Because it's tough. Success comes from many levels for different people. So where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say. I can see weekly sales in a general sense, and my agent said sales are okay considering it's a pandemic. But it's a real bummer because going into publication, The Herd, there was a lot of excitement around it that sort of meant it had more buzz and it felt like more momentum than The Lost Night. And so it really felt like it could be sort of a breakout, which for me would mean, a totally new direction in my career. And again, there's something unique with fiction writing where you only get a chance once a year at most. I write about a book a year to announce yourself. Like you get that one moment and then you sort of retreat and go back to writing and get it for the next book. So, yeah, to have it happen 2 days after the stay-at-home order in at least New York State and much of America and all the bookstores shut down was just hugely disappointing. And we can see that hardcover sales are way down, which kind of makes sense. You can't wander into a bookshop and leave with 4 books you didn't know you were going to get. So all that said, I am considering it a success in terms of, I'm really proud of it. I think it's a better book because hopefully every book I write is going to get better as I learn more of what I'm doing. And I'm really proud of it, and I can't see the alternate timeline when it came out during, peaceful, normal times. And so I kind of feel like, the best thing I can do is just keep writing and keep sort of playing the long game, and focus on what's going to be next.
You betcha. And since you're on, I guess I should say we're going to have Andy do exactly what you recommended everybody else, which is you're going to pitch your own product, 2 or 3 sentences. So tell your about the herd in 3 sentences, please.
Oh boy. Okay. So The Herd. The Herd is a juicy and fun thriller that is set in an exclusive elite all-female co-working space in New York City that is rocked by the sudden disappearance of its glamorous founder, Eleanor, who goes missing the night of an important company announcement. And it's sort of up to her 2 closest friends, who happen to be sisters, to figure out what happened to her. And the book is told from their sort of alternating points of view. And as they dig, the more they dig, the more secrets they uncover. And they're forced to really confront what happens when women's perfect veneers begin to crumble and crack and fall away. And so it's hopefully a fun and juicy and escapist read, but it also kind of goes deep on these themes of complex female friendships and, commercial feminism and really the sky-high expectations and double standards that we have for high-achieving women in the U.S.
Typically, females will gravitate to materials like this, but it's not meant for just females. And moreover, is your demographic, I wanted to ask, typically younger or middle of the road? Do you know? Are you more of an appeal to the older crowd? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think a few people have called it a millennial thriller, which I think is funny, and I think you don't need to be millennial in order to read it, certainly.
Sure.
But it does center around characters who are in their late 20s and early 30s. And it does sort of center around, concerns and discussions around feminism and around, progressive ideals and women's role in society as seen through the lens of these very successful, ambitious, educated, high-achieving women who live in New York City and who are in their 20s and 30s. And so I think it's a fun escapist read for anyone in any age group, and hopefully when you read it, you feel like you're right in the middle of this scene. But I think you might relate to it most closely if you are around that age and are used to sort of the messaging and the misogyny and the discussions of it that, women in their 20s and 30s are sort of thinking about today.
Absolutely. Well, and the other interesting question is, would you ever do a re-release? Meaning, okay, virus ends, for the most part, most of us are back to life. Would you do something like that? Kind of do another momentum run with this by a re-release?
Right. So, that would be the publisher's decision, and they're absolutely not going to.
Oh, that's right.
So in terms of like having another big push, that just won't happen. They've moved on to focus on all of the new, books coming out. And it's the same thing with events. So many people said, well, can't you just reschedule it for later? No, because they're already scheduled for later with other books. But the good news is it'll come out in paperback sometime in 2021. So that'll be another exciting moment. And, hopefully I'll have another book next year, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about all of my books on that tour.
Oh, you betcha. Well, that brought to mind the obvious question, which is, now that it's been a little bit of time since you released the last one, how soon do you literally just take the downtime, meaning from writing a full-blown book, before you start the next one? Or have you given any thought to what the next one will be yet?
Yeah, so the next one I've already turned in a draft to my editor.
Wow.
With the way that the publishing schedule works, I sold the idea last fall, and I just turned it in last month in April. And so that is currently set to come out in spring of 2021. We'll see if anything shifts again, because the pandemic is shaking so many things up. But yeah, my sort of plan and goal is to just keep writing a book a year and keep doing this full time, so that I can, over time, kind of build a career. I'm not the kind of person who could put a book out and then wait 8 years for the next one. That's not that's sort of not my approach to doing it full time.
You betcha. And we don't want to forget to mention the obvious, because you have an upcoming virtual event called The Double Shot of Noir at the Bar Queens, which is on the Crowdcast platform. I saw that today. And there's I was a little confused because when I went on one of your social medias, it says May 15th, and then on your website it has a different date. So I want to be clear on this. What day are you participating at this event?
Thank you for saying that. I will go and make sure that my events page is correct.
Yeah.
So it's a two Friday event, which is part of the confusion, but I will be participating on the 15th. So I'll make sure that my website at andreabartz.com/events,
yes,
which should list all my upcoming virtual stuff. I'll make sure that that's corrected. But yeah, I would love to sort of virtually meet people in upcoming events over some of these reading series and online things.
I gotcha. Now, before we go into all the different ways that people can find you, I have to ask this question. So, I have children. So, typically, I have written about all of them because they're my loves in my life, of course, obviously. And I see that apparently I see a whole lot of Mona going on everywhere in your social media. So, I had to ask the question, has she written for Mona yet? Because everybody writes about the loves of their life. I'm like, you were crazy about this cat. It's so cute. I'm like, oh, my God, it's adorable. So, are you going to write for Mona?
I mean, I am crazy about this cat, Mona, and if anyone, looks at a photo, they'll understand why. It's not just me. She's actually perfect.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't really written for her. It's funny. There's a cat character in The Herd, and so many people have said, oh, you must have based that on Mona, but I hadn't adopted Mona when I was writing it. I adopted her after I'd turned it in. So we'll see. I mean, she won't appreciate it the way that your kids can, so I think she'd much rather me play with her than devote time on my laptop to her.
I am certainly sure. No, I get that, but it's just adorable. So, folks, if you want to check her out, I'm about to tell you where to find her pictures of her cat. Because Mona's everywhere, literally. Mona, what do you think of this? Mona's watching television. Mona was doing the Mona Moment hashtag. It was so cute. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is adorable. Gosh, look at that.
To be fair, she is the only living creature that I've had any interaction with for the last few months. Because I'm in studio apartment alone with my cat.
Right.
So I do love her a lot, but that might be why she's kind of the only photos that I put up these days.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
In my defense.
Well, hey, you have somebody there, you know what I'm saying, and that's better than nobody.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, virtual relationships that we're forming, online and various platforms helps too, so definitely. But yeah, I just had to throw that in there. I'm like, okay. So now, if you've all listened this last hour, can you believe it? It's been an hour. I do these shows, and I'm like, seriously? You must be joking. It's been an hour, but it has. If you wish to find her, I'm going to read off all the various ways that I found you on social media. You can let me know if I've missed anything. The website, again, is Andrea, and it's Andrea Bartz.com, and that's spelled BARTZ.com. She can also be found on both Twitter and Instagram with the handle ANDI, again, Bartz, BARTZ. She's on Facebook under the name Andrea Bartz Author. She has a profile on LinkedIn. She can also be found on Goodreads, Amazon, Audible, and I believe that's everything. Obviously, of course, the various platforms that we indicated, which I have up on social media already as far as where your work has been printed. Any place else, though, that I might have been missing?
I feel like you really got them all. Yeah, I'm on Goodreads. I think you mentioned that one, but yeah, those are all the places, and probably Twitter and Instagram are probably where I'm the most active. If you want the most immediate Mona photos.
Absolutely. And you want to see Mona, you definitely want to go to Twitter and Instagram because, of course, Mona is on both places. I can attest because I creeped on her earlier, of course. This is what I can tell you, lovely lady, now that I've been petrified of you for the last hour. It's always my pleasure, and I've said this 175 times, to open up my platforms to anyone who does what I do. I think it takes a tremendous amount of courage and creativity to be an author. Anytime, pandemic, no pandemic, it's a very difficult passion to pursue. I commend you because you have done such an incredible amount of good work, and I don't mean just in print. I mean, the way that you inspire other individuals with the genre that you use. I find everyone to be fascinating and entertaining when they go outside of themselves, start using their pen, and take multiple personifications of themselves and put it in print. And that's what you've done, basically. So congratulations on all the wonderful work. I'm praying for you that, of course, obviously, people go out and get the book, whether it's an ebook version, audio version. Just buy the book. Buy 10 books, buy one, buy 10. Buy them for all your friends. I can't say that enough. And certainly know that my platform is always open to you. If you need a review of the book, not that I think you do, because you probably have everyone under the sun wanting to talk to you, but my magazine, of course, is open to you because we do book reviews in the magazine. And, of course, like I said, anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome to come on the show. We're all pretty free and welcome over here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to speak with you, and it's always so nice to connect with a fellow author who really,
Absolutely.
you have great questions because you get it. I appreciate that.
Oh, of course, certainly. And please stay safe in New York. Obviously, of course, I know it's a very harrowing time. So do stay safe, and we will be in touch. And you have a wonderful day, dear.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was Andrea Bartz. Wasn't she just adorable? And go to her social media page. You'll see she's just absolutely adorable looking, too, as well. Not that she needs to be attractive, to be intelligent and accomplished, but there you go. Again, it was Andrea Bartz, the website andreabartz.com. She is on Instagram and Twitter as Andy, A-N-D-I, Bartz, LinkedIn, Goodreads, Amazon, Audible, and, of course, her Facebook profile is Andrea Bartz Author. So my deepest, deepest thanks to her. Again, the names of the two books are The Lost Night and The Herd. You can go ahead and look for those on all those platforms. And, of course, Ballantine Books is the publisher for The Herd, which, again, was released on March 24th. And, of course, look for A Double Shot of Noir at the Bar Queens via the Crowdcast platform. And, again, if you want to see some of her past written work, Wall Street Journal, Travel and Leisure, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and USA Today. So, again, thank you so much to Andrea for being on the show. Thank you so much to everybody who is listening in today. My deepest thanks to my children for being so patient. I am now officially off the air, of course. I'm not working weekends. Why? Because, well, I don't need to, at least at the moment. And why? Well, it's just nice to be home with the kids. I guess I'm very tired of all of this, but, yeah, it's time to get back to things. Don't want to forget to mention I come back on air Wednesday, May 13th, with one of the filmmakers, actually, that won at our last film festival, Bedford Falls, Duncan Putney. Macy's Goes to War is the name of his film. We'll be coming on the show Wednesday to discuss the film, his updated projects, whole 9 years. Absolutely lovely fellow. So please tune in on the 13th. For very last thing, to my significant other, thank you so much. I want to do this publicly just because of the fact that without his help and without his creativity, I never would have been able to do Bedford Falls. So from me to you, my dear, thank you so much for everything you do to make my life and that of other fellow makers just better, bigger, brighter. You're the bomb. You're the shit. I don't know what else I can say about that. So everybody have a wonderful weekend, or at least try to stay safe, of course, if you can. Like I said, check my social media for details on the drive-in. You all take care, and we'll talk to you next week.